Let me go straight ahead to the situation in Ukraine, where the country is on the brink of war. An alleged ultimatum for Ukrainian forces to surrender, denied by Moscow, expired without an incident today. Speaking a few hours after the lapse of the deadline, Russian President Vladimir Putin said there is no need yet to send Russian troops into Ukraine. Putin, however, noted that Russia reserves the right to use all means to protect citizens in the east of the country. Addressing a group of journalists, Putin denied troops had besieged Ukrainians based in Crimea and added they were pro-Russian self-defense forces.
What
can be a reason to use the armed forces? This is of course the last resort, simply the last resort. If we see that lawlessness starting in eastern regions too, if people ask us for help and we have already an official address from the current legitimate president, we reserve the right to use all options at our disposal to protect those citizens. The possibility to deploy troops is there. But I would like to say that the army drills that we had recently were not anyhow related to the events in Ukraine. This was an event planned by us long ago. We just naturally did not announce it.
The practice maneuvers, which included live fire exercises and involved more than 150,000 servicemen, up to 90 planes, over 120 helicopters, more than 800 military vehicles and 80 warships, as tensions over the situation in Ukraine escalated. Russia's upper house of parliament approved the use of armed forces in Ukraine, which shares a long land border with Russia, over the weekend, prompting world leaders to condemn Moscow's armed incursion as an invasion and call for economic sanctions. A tense standoff was reported over the weekend between Ukrainian soldiers loyal to Kiev and Russian commandos at the Perivalnia military base in Ukraine's Crimea region. This footage was recorded by French news agency France 24, and the base was surrounded by at least 100 heavily armed commandos who admitted they were Russian. They were watched by Ukrainian soldiers who remained behind the barracks' closed gates. Meanwhile, 2 Russian landing warships passed through Turkey's Bosphorus on their way to the Black Sea port of Sevastopol after Russia withdrew them from its navy's operations in the eastern Mediterranean. Soldiers believed to be Russian have been filmed as they patrol the streets of the Crimean administrative center, Simferopol. The video shows uniformed soldiers carrying automatic guns patrolling the streets of the city. Russian forces have already bloodlessly seized Crimea, an isolated Black Sea peninsula where Moscow has a naval base. The seizure of Crimea has created the greatest confrontation between Russia and the West since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Meanwhile, Moscow's envoy to the UN said that Ukraine's ousted leader Viktor Yanukovych has sent a letter to Russian President Vladimir Putin requesting that he use the Russian military to restore law and order in Ukraine.
Madam President, today I am also authorized to say the following. The President of Russia has received the following from President Yanukovych, and I quote, "The statements of the President of Ukraine. As a legitimately elected representative, I say that the events in my place and the events in Kiev have resulted in the fact that Ukraine is on the brink of a civil war. In the country, there is chaos and anarchy. The life, the security and the rights of people, particularly in the southeast part in Crimea, are being threatened. So under the influence of Western countries, there are open acts of terror and violence. People are being persecuted for language and political reasons. So in this regard, I will call on the President of Russia, Mr. Putin, ask him to use the armed forces of the Russian Federation to establish the legitimacy, peace, law and order, stability and defending the people of Ukraine." Viktor Yanukovych, 1st of March 2014. So colleagues, I have an opportunity to show all of you a photo statement of the President of Ukraine.
Президенту Украины к президенту России.
A spokesman for the Russian Defense Ministry has said that media reports about an alleged Russian ultimatum made to the Ukrainian armed forces in Crimea are total nonsense. According to the Interfax news agency, their spokesperson had said that no ultimatum had been made to the Ukrainian forces. The Russian Foreign Ministry also stressed that the Black Sea Fleet units in Crimea are not interfering into the internal events of Ukrainian politics. It has also been reported that at least 700 Ukrainian soldiers and officers had defected today, announcing their readiness to defend the population of Crimea. Moreover, President Barack Obama held a high-level meeting at the White House about Ukraine with senior military and national security advisors. Secretary of State John Kerry, Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel, National Security Advisor Susan Rice, Treasury Secretary Jack Lew and General Martin Dempsey were among those in attendance. Russian troops without insignia were guarding the terminal in the Crimean port city of Kerch. There was no immediate sign of any new movements by Russian forces in Crimea overnight, although Ukraine's acting president said on Monday that Russia's military presence on the Black Sea Peninsula was growing. Ukrainian officials said Russia was building up armor on its side of the 4.5-kilometer wide Kerch Strait between the Crimean Peninsula and southern Russia. Russian forces shipped 3 truckloads of troops by ferry into Crimea after taking control of the border post on the Ukrainian side.